El Chapo's final prison. Inside ADX Florence, escape-proof Supermax. Before we step inside the darkest prison on earth, subscribe, like, and leave a comment if you're ready to stare straight into a place even fear tries to avoid. The silence that screamed the alarm didn't scream at ADX Florence. It didn't need to. When the red lights flickered on inside cell block D at exactly 2:17 a.m., every correctional officer in the building felt it in their bones. The kind of silence that followed wasn't calm, it was wrong. No shouts, no banging on steel doors, just a heavy stillness, as if the prison itself was holding its breath. ADX Florence sat alone in the high desert of Colorado, surrounded by razor wire, gun towers, and miles of empty land. The locals called it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. The Bureau of Prisons called it administrative maximum. Inmate slang had a simpler name: hell. This was where America buried its worst monsters. Terrorists, serial killers, crime bosses too dangerous to exist anywhere else. And tonight, something had gone wrong inside the cell reserved for the most infamous prisoner in the building, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. The officer who noticed it first was Senior CO Mark Ellison, a 15-year veteran who'd seen men cry, break, and lose their minds behind those concrete walls. He was walking his routine perimeter check when his handheld scanner failed to register movement inside cell D. Unit 13. ADX cells were designed to be watched constantly. Pressure sensors, motion detectors, thermal imaging. An inmate could barely sit down without the system knowing. Ellison stopped walking. He checked the scanner again. Nothing. No movement. No heat signature. That wasn't possible. Inmate status check, D13. He muttered into his radio, forcing calm into his voice. Systems reading 0. Static crackled. Then, repeat, D13. Ellison's hand tightened around the radio. 0 movement. 0 heat. The hallway lights dimmed automatically as the prison entered lockdown protocol. Steel doors sealed with a deep, mechanical thud. Somewhere above, armed guards took position in the towers, rifles trained inward. Ellison approached the cell slowly. ADX cells weren't normal. They were poured concrete tombs, soundproof, reinforced, with a solid steel door and a narrow slot no wider than a book. Inside, inmates spent 23 hours a day alone. No human contact. No noise. No mercy. El Chapo had been in this cell for 6 years. Ellison leaned forward and peered through the reinforced glass slit. The cell was empty. The bed was bolted to the wall. The toilet was stainless steel. The sink gleamed under the dim light. No body. No blood. No sign of forced entry. Just absence. Ellison stepped back, heart hammering. "That's not possible," he whispered. But the scanner didn't lie. ADX Florence was built on a single promise: no one ever escaped. By sunrise, the prison was crawling with federal agents. The FBI, the Bureau of Prisons Internal Affairs, Homeland Security, and one woman who hadn't set foot inside ADX Florence in over a decade. Special Agent Rebecca Hale arrived just after 6:40 a.m., her black SUV cutting through the morning fog. She stared up at the concrete fortress as she stepped out, the cold biting through her coat. She'd helped design early counter-escape protocols for Supermax facilities. She knew every rumor, every myth. ADX wasn't just a prison. It was a psychological weapon. "Tell me exactly what you found," Hale said as she walked, her boots echoing down the corridor. Warden Thomas Klein didn't slow his pace. His face looked carved from stone. "We found nothing. That's the problem." They stopped outside D, Unit 13. Armed officers lined the hall, fingers near triggers. Klein gestured to the open cell. Hale stepped inside. The air felt sterile. Dead. She ran her fingers along the bed frame, checking seams, corners, vents. No scratches. No loosened bolts. The toilet was intact. The sink untouched. ADX cells had no windows. No ceiling vents large enough to crawl through. No access points. "You're telling me the most escape-proof cell in the United States just misplaced El Chapo?" Hale asked. Klein's jaw tightened. "I'm telling you our systems say he never left." Hale looked up sharply. "Explain." "The pressure sensors never triggered. Cameras never lost visual. There's no footage of a door opening. According to the logs, Guzman lay down at 10:03 p.m. and remained there until 2:17 a.m. Then why is the bed empty? That's what we need you to tell us." Hale walked back into the hallway. Her mind raced. El Chapo wasn't just any inmate. He was the man who escaped a Mexican prison hidden in a laundry cart. The man who vanished through a mile-long tunnel dug beneath a shower drain. If anyone believed escape was impossible, it was because they underestimated him. Who had access to this unit? Hale asked. Klein exhaled slowly. Officially? No one. Unofficially? A very short list. They moved into the control room. Screens showed every angle of the prison, every hallway, every cell door. Hale noticed something immediately. Rewind that, she said, pointing to a monitor. The footage rolled back to 1:58 a.m. A guard stood outside D, Unit 13, motionless. Pause. The image froze. That's Officer Daniel Cross, Klein said. Transferred here last year. Zoom in. The tech magnified the image. Cross's eyes were open. Too open. Hale felt a chill. That's not a guard on duty, she said quietly. That's a body. An autopsy later confirmed it. Daniel Cross had been dead for nearly an hour before the alarm triggered. Cause of death: a precise injection of potassium chloride, administered directly into the carotid artery. No struggle. No defensive wounds. Professional. Someone had killed a guard inside ADX Florence without triggering a single alert. The investigation exploded outward. Cross's financial records showed something troubling. Large cash deposits over the past 6 months. Not enough to raise alarms individually. Enough to paint a picture together. Hale stood over the evidence board, photos and timelines stretching across the wall. Bribery gets you favors, she said. Not miracles. But what if the miracle wasn't an escape? Klein asked. Hale turned to him. What do you mean? What if Guzman never planned to leave ADX? Klein said. What if this was about something else entirely? They found the answer in Cross's locker. Hidden behind a false panel was a small, encrypted flash drive. No markings. No fingerprints. When they cracked it open, the first file froze everyone in the room. A live video feed. Timestamped. From inside ADX Florence. The camera angle was low, hidden. The audio was clean. El Chapo sat on his bed, staring directly into the lens. Smiling. I told them, he said softly, his voice calm, controlled. No prison is built without a door. The video cut to black, but the final frame remained burned into Hale's mind. Behind Guzman, carved faintly into the concrete wall, were 3 numbers. 13, 47, 9, coordinates. And they pointed somewhere inside ADX Florence. But when the response team broke through the sealed section of the prison tied to those numbers, what they uncovered would prove El Chapo's greatest weapon was never escape. It was what he left behind. The door inside the wall, the sealed section tied to the coordinates, sat beneath ADX Florence, deeper than most staff even knew existed. Section 13, Corridor 47, Cell 9. The elevator ride down felt longer than it was. The hum of the cables echoed through the shaft, each floor passing like a countdown. Special Agent Rebecca Hale stood with her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the glowing numbers above the doors. Around her, a tactical team in matte black gear checked weapons they hoped they wouldn't need. ADX Florence wasn't supposed to have secrets. Everything was measured, logged, accounted for. Yet here they were, descending into a part of the prison that didn't officially exist. The doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Cold air rolled out. This level smelled different. Damp concrete, metal, and something older. The lights flickered on in sequence, revealing a narrow corridor that felt less like a prison wing and more like a bunker. This section was built during the original construction, Warden Klein said quietly. It was designed for contingency housing, high-value detainees. Cold War stuff. Why wasn't it used? Hale asked. Klein hesitated. Because even the Bureau decided it crossed a line. They moved forward, boots crunching softly against the floor. The walls were thicker here, the doors heavier. Each cell was sealed with layered steel and reinforced locks that required dual authorization. They stopped at cell 9. The door was closed. Open it, Hale said. The tech swiped his badge. Nothing. Try manual, Klein ordered. The team leader stepped forward, inserted a physical key, and turned. The lock disengaged. That alone made Hale's stomach twist. The door creaked open. Inside, the cell wasn't empty. The walls were covered. Not with blood. Not with scratches. With writing. Names. Dates. Locations. Financial figures. Shipping routes. Bank codes. Some etched deep into the concrete. Others scrawled in charcoal, layered on top of each other like a madman's journal. But this wasn't madness. This was organization. At the center of the cell sat a steel table. On it lay a thick manila folder, untouched by dust. Hale opened it. Inside were photographs, men in suits, men in uniforms, men standing behind podiums and flags. Senators, CEOs, federal contractors, foreign intelligence liaisons. Every photo had a red mark drawn across the eyes. This isn't an escape plan, Hale said slowly. It's a map. To what? Klein asked. To a war, she replied. The evidence suggested something terrifying. El Chapo hadn't been trying to leave ADX Florence. He'd been building something inside it. By noon, the story had been locked down. No press, no leaks. Officially, El Chapo was temporarily unaccounted for. Unofficially, Washington was panicking. Hale sat in a secure briefing room watching analysts tear through the data recovered from Cell 9. The names weren't random. They intersected across shell companies, offshore accounts, private military contracts, and intelligence back channels. This goes way beyond drug trafficking, an analyst said, voice tight. Some of these people are still active. Some are protected. Protected by who? Hale asked. The room went quiet. Another agent spoke up. By us. The implications were clear. Guzman had turned ADX Florence into a command center, using time, isolation, and corruption to build leverage. Every bribe, every compromised guard, every whispered favor had fed into something bigger. And then the first body was found. Officer Luis Moreno didn't show up for his shift. He was discovered 2 miles outside the prison, his car abandoned at a rest stop. He sat in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, eyes open. Cause of death, cardiac arrest induced by a synthetic compound. No signs of struggle. On the passenger seat lay a single sheet of paper. 3 numbers were written in ink. The message was clear. Someone else knew. The danger escalated fast. Over the next 48 hours, 2 more prison employees vanished. One resigned via email and disappeared entirely. The other was found alive, but catatonic, rocking in a hospital bed, whispering the same phrase over and over. There is a door inside the wall. Hale barely slept. She replayed the video of El Chapo's smile again and again. No prison is built without a door. He wasn't talking about concrete. He was talking about people. She dug into Daniel Cross's past. The dead guard. His background check had been clean. Military service. No criminal record. Stable finances until the deposit started. Then Hale found something else. Cross's sister had been arrested 6 years earlier in Arizona for drug possession. Charges mysteriously dropped. No record of why. The same year El Chapo was extradited to the United States. He owned him, Hale muttered. The realization hit hard. El Chapo hadn't needed to escape physically. He'd escaped through influence. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A junior analyst flagged an anomaly in the prison's internal maintenance logs. A pattern of routine inspections that didn't align with actual work orders. They're too regular, the analyst said. Every 13 days. Always between 1:30 and 2 a.m. And, Hale asked, and they correspond to moments when Guzman's cell sensors went partially blind. Not offline, just dulled. Hale leaned forward. You're saying he had privacy? Yes. Inside ADX Florence. They traced the maintenance logs to a subcontractor, an obscure engineering firm that handled sensor calibration. The firm had only one long-term employee assigned to ADX, a man named Peter Lang. Lang had vanished 3 weeks earlier. His apartment was empty. No signs of struggle. No electronics. No personal documents. But in the bathroom mirror, written in condensation-resistant marker, were 3 words. I kept the door open. Hale stood alone in cell D, Unit 13 that night, staring at the bare walls. She imagined El Chapo lying on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, listening to the silence. Planning. Calculating. ADX was designed to break men by isolating them. Instead, it had given him the one thing he'd never had before. Time. And he'd used it to study the system from the inside out. She knelt near the bed and ran her fingers along the concrete. There. A seam. Barely visible. Perfectly disguised. She pressed. The panel slid open with a soft click. Behind it was a cavity no wider than a briefcase. Inside sat a burner phone. It rang the moment she touched it. Hale froze. Slowly, she answered. You're late, a familiar voice said on the other end. Her blood ran cold. El Chapo, she whispered. He chuckled softly. You Americans love cages. You think walls are the end of the story. Where are you? Hale demanded. Closer than you think, he replied. and farther than you can reach. The line crackled. I didn't leave ADX, he continued. I expanded it. The call ended. Alarms blared throughout the prison. At the same moment, 3 encrypted emails were released to journalists across the globe, containing names, documents, and proof of corruption that tied governments, corporations, and law enforcement together in ways no one could deny. The world woke up to chaos. And as Hale stood in the cell, staring at the hidden door behind the wall, she realized the truth too late. El Chapo's final prison wasn't ADX Florence. ADX Florence was his weapon. And now, it was pointed outward. The prison that followed him, Washington, burned quietly. Not with fire, but with fear. By the time dawn broke over the Rockies, the leaked files had detonated across every major news outlet in the Western world. Senators issued denials before the documents finished uploading. CEOs resigned mid-interview. Intelligence agencies scrambled to discredit evidence that was already verified, cross-checked, and mirrored on servers no one could trace. The public saw corruption. Rebecca Hale saw architecture. El Chapo hadn't escaped ADX Florence. He had turned it inside out and projected it onto the world. Cells made of secrets, walls built from silence, guards paid in leverage instead of cash. He had rebuilt prison logic at scale. And now, the doors were slamming shut on everyone else. Hale stood in a temporary command center outside the prison as helicopters churned the air overhead. Federal agents moved with the nervous precision of people who knew they were already behind. We've traced the email release nodes, an analyst said. They're bouncing through 3 continents. Whoever set this up anticipated countermeasures years in advance. Can we shut it down? Hale asked. The analyst hesitated. If we pull the plug, the dead man's switch activates. Everything goes public. Financial records, audio, video, names. How many? Hale asked. The analyst swallowed. Hundreds, maybe thousands. The room fell silent. Warden Klein rubbed his face with both hands. Then what does he want? Hale didn't answer right away. She was staring at the final file El Chapo had released, one he descheduled for delayed delivery unless certain conditions were met. It wasn't evidence. It was a confession, not of crimes, of strategy. He wants control, Hale said finally. Not money, not freedom. Control over the narrative. And how do we give that to a man who vanished from the most secure prison on earth? Klein asked. Hale looked toward ADX Florence, its concrete walls glowing under the rising sun. By admitting the truth, she said, that he never vanished. The manhunt that followed wasn't loud. There were no highway chases, no shootouts, just quiet disappearances. A federal prosecutor overseeing cartel cases resigned and fled the country. A defense contractor tied to black site prisons was found dead in his penthouse, ruled a suicide despite the lack of a weapon. A former intelligence liaison vanished during a layover in Frankfurt. Every incident was followed by a single email sent to a private list. No threats, just reminders. You are still inside, one message read. The phrase became a whisper in government corridors. Inside what? The answer arrived 72 hours later. Rebecca Hale received the message at 2:17 a.m., the same time the alarm had first triggered. The email contained a single attachment, a video. She hesitated before opening it, then pressed play. The footage showed a dimly lit room, concrete walls, a steel table. It could have been anywhere. Then El Chapo stepped into frame. He looked older, thinner, calm, still smiling. You found my door, he said, as if continuing a conversation. Most people never do. Hale leaned closer to the screen. I did not escape, Guzman continued. I transferred. The camera panned. Behind him was a blueprint, familiar and horrifying. ADX Florence. Every corridor, every cell, every sensor. Except this version extended outward, lines branching off like veins. Prisons are not buildings, El Chapo said. They are systems, and systems can be copied. The video cut to images of data centers, financial institutions, intelligence hubs. You put me in a place where time stops, he went on. You took my body. You gave me patience. Hale felt her chest tighten. I watched how men obeyed rules they did not believe in, he said. How they protected walls that were already cracking. How silence became currency. The screen went black. Then one final line of text appeared. You built the perfect prison. I simply removed the walls. The government made a decision that would never appear in any official record. They buried ADX Florence. Not physically, but conceptually. The prison remained operational, but its mythology died. No more interviews. No more documentaries. No more mention of who was housed there. El Chapo was officially declared deceased. Cause: undisclosed medical complication. The story ran for one news cycle before vanishing beneath the weight of newer scandals, many of them seated quietly by the same invisible hand. Rebecca Hale knew better. She resigned 2 weeks later. No farewell. No statement. She moved into a small house in New Mexico, far from agencies, far from screens. But she couldn't escape the feeling that followed her everywhere, that she was still being watched. Months passed. The world stabilized in the way it always did, by pretending nothing fundamental had changed. But Hale noticed patterns. Legislation stalled inexplicably. Investigations dissolved overnight. Whistleblowers recanted without explanation. And every so often, a powerful figure would disappear, not into exile, not into prison, but into irrelevance. Erased. One evening, Hale received a package. No return address. Inside was a book. A prison log. ADX Florence, D-Unit. El Chapo's handwriting filled the margins. Dates. Observations. Names. And on the final page, a note written directly to her. "You were curious," it read. "That is why I did not put you in a cell." Hale stared at the page, her hands trembling. At the bottom was a familiar sequence. Coordinates again. This time, not inside ADX Florence. Inside Washington, D.C. The final revelation came a year later. A low-level contractor, dying of cancer, agreed to speak on record. He'd worked on a classified project known internally as Florence Protocol. Its purpose wasn't incarceration. It was containment, a system designed to quietly neutralize threats, not by locking them away, but by surrounding them with invisible walls of debt, blackmail, surveillance, and social isolation. ADX Florence had been the prototype. El Chapo had been the test subject. He didn't break, the contractor said. He learned. When asked where Guzman was now, the man shook his head. "You're asking the wrong question," he said. "He's not somewhere." "Then what is he?" the interviewer asked. The contractor looked directly into the camera. "He's the warden." Rebecca Hale stood one last time outside ADX Florence. The wind howled across the empty desert. The prison loomed silent, its watchtowers unmanned, its lights dimmed. A monument to certainty. She realized then that El Chapo hadn't beaten the system. He had exposed it. ADX Florence had promised an escape-proof future, and delivered something far worse. A prison without walls. One that followed you home. One that never needed bars. As Hale turned away, her phone buzzed with a notification. No sender. No subject. Just a single line of text. "You are still free," it read. "That is a privilege." She powered the phone off and walked into the desert, knowing the truth the world would never fully accept. They thought El Chapo's final prison was ADX Florence. But the real one was the system he left behind. And if this story unsettled you, remember, there are doors everywhere. You just haven't noticed them yet.